Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our next Bias and Racism in Gaming panel. This is something that is important to us at the Role Players because we do believe in recognizing and lifting up marginalized communities. And to start us off on that note, we're going to start on a land and labor acknowledgement. This is our way of acknowledging the people that came before us and the contributions they made. In Los Angeles, where the Role Players and I are at, we recognize the Kizh, the Tongva, and the Chumash people. In Chicago, where Cicero and Javier are calling in from, we recognize the Kickapoo, the Peoria, the Kaskaskia, the Potawatomi, and the Maiamia people. We recognize the peoples also of the lands from where you all live, wherever you're watching us from or listening to us from. We recognize the labor of those who are native to these lands and those who are brought here and those who are made here to work against their will. Their labor made our nation and contributes to its success even today. We also recognize the pain and suffering they endured in building this nation and that the debt is not fully paid. Let this statement be our small way to honor broken treaties, repair broken promises, and promote healing. And so on that note, thank you for taking the time to listen and to honor this acknowledgement with us. We're going to dive in and meet our panelists. So we have joining us today, our very own DM, Judd. Say hi, Judd.
Hi, hey everybody. And I probably should have said this at the beginning, but welcome to the Role Players channel. We're hosting a very important Bias and Racism in Gaming panel. It's our second, and thank you for tuning in. It's so good to see everybody.
Yes, thank you. We will be having more of this, so stay tuned for those in the future. We also have joining us tonight, cast member, gamer, actor, and filmmaker, Brent Davis.
How are you? Can't talk. How are you, everybody? Hope you're having a great Monday evening.
Thank you, Brent. And of course, this lovely person should look familiar. We have returning to our screen, tabletop performer, podcaster, voiceover artist, Cicero Holmes.
Hello, everyone. Greetings and salutations.
And then our newest friend, we're so glad to have joining us here today, gamer, human values educator, and co-founder of the Human Values Club, Javier Payano.
Hey, everyone. So excited to be here and can't wait for today's conversation.
Yes, thank you. And I'm Jamie. I am the DI manager for the Role Players, and I'll be the facilitator for this evening's conversation. And so a big part of the reason why we're doing this, as I mentioned earlier, uplifting marginalized communities, acknowledging that inequities exist, because even in the nerdiest of places, yes, racism and bias exist. And those of us who live at the intersection of being Black, Indigenous, or people of color all live in that world and experience this on a day-to-day basis. I think one of my favorite sayings that came up in our prep meetings was that racism is as American as apple pie. And that really is very true. And so some of the examples that have come up, for example, anyone who's played Call of Duty, I never have. I've heard horrible things about what happens. And you're seeing the faces of our Call of Duty players right now, that happens in those rooms. We're familiar with the racism in the traditional D&D settings. And we all know that last year sparked an entire reinvigorated movement of anti-racism because of the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many more that really should be honored and lost because of what's happening here in America. But we also acknowledge that despite some of what's been happening, there's also been progress that's been made. And so that's a part of what we're going to talk about today. How can we move forward in dismantling white supremacy and colonialism? What strengths can we lean into to really start to leverage these conversations and change our very own beloved gaming community so that everyone from all walks of life and every intersection of identities feels safe, feels welcome, and feels affirmed? So on that note, I would like to kick it off to Brent. Brent, I know that you've done some research in preparation for this, and we had some discussions about what can we do to help dismantle this. And we talked a little bit about representation and visibility and education. So tell us a little bit more about that from your perspective.
Yes, I've been trying to, especially running up to this right now, I've been trying to read up as much as I can on a lot of the criticisms that came out of last year and just like the problems that have been like very apparent and just being spoken now. And like a lot of what's been talking about usually centered around like most obviously like orcs and drow and the idea of like evil races and having like they're already right off the bat, you have someone that you could think of as a free person to slaughter. They're your enemies. You can kill them. You don't have to feel bad about it. And just like, how do we go around that and like re-look at a lot of the things that have been like built into it? Like, and saying that, like, I do acknowledge that a part of like D&D has been so much built up on that, but also like there's so much love for like the race and the characters and the identities of the people there. It's just like, how do we not just like, I'm not saying erase it or try to undo what has been totally done, but like maneuver it into another way where it's more practical for the setting and for the idea of like anti-racism. I mean, like they have several other settings within the D&D community where they take a different look at things. Like definitely through like Eberron, you find like the orc population is like the natural druid population, and like they're more nurturers of the land, and like the more could be identified as like a Native American style community. But like to take it away from that, I'm just trying to figure out better ways to do it. In my mind, there's a lot of things to like kind of unpacked with that. And I don't know if anyone else has things to drop on them, what I just said.
Well, so I think part of that has to do with history, right? It has to do with, who's at the gate and who's behind that gate, right? And who's controlling. So, it's about getting creators of color to come in and be able to build the worlds. And it's about the people that are responsible for approving the new ideas also being enlightened enough to understand that these new ideas are needed, because part of the issue with the Drow being created is because the creators themselves were looking at creating a power fantasy for themselves, and they saw themselves as they saw themselves in the mirror, and whether it was conscious or not, were creating stories and adventures, not only for them, but for people who look like them, because they just assumed that everyone looked like them and had this homogenous cultural identity that would immediately associate darker skin with evil and lighter skin with purity and goodness. Mm-hmm. So, it may not have been malicious, but it was implied. It was part of what is baked into them. So if you get people that are darker hued and realize like, hey, I'm not evil just because I'm me, I'm evil because I'm a jerk, right? Like I'm not, I'm not just evil just to be evil. So I can create stories where people that look like me aren't necessarily judged just based on the color of their skin, because I know what that feels like, and it doesn't feel great. And as more people get to see and hear and experience those stories, and that's one of the beautiful things about tabletop is, it goes a step beyond. And I know that Javier is a novice when it comes to rolling dice, but is not a novice when it comes to playing RPGs. So like the beauty of playing, of rolling the dice and being a player at a table is that you gain a level of oneness with the character that you're playing, that you're inhabiting. that is above and beyond what you would get when you're playing a video game, which is completely interactive, because you're the developer here, right? You're the developer, you're the artist, you're the one who is really with the help of the people at the table, you're creating the game, right? And playing it at the same time. And so when you get to see someone that's like you, even in an imaginary setting, and people that don't look like you also get to see someone who doesn't look like them, but looks like you in an imaginary setting as the hero, then they can see you as the hero. And not only you, someone they know, but someone they don't know that has the same complexion as you. They can envision them as the hero as opposed to inherently the villain.
Exactly.
And that's so important, because when we look at the history of media, American media and gaming, the protagonists and the heroes, they don't look like those of us who identify as BIPOC. I never saw anybody who identifies the way I do. I identify as a queer woman of color and a daughter of immigrants. I never saw anybody highlighted in a positive light growing up that looks like me or identifies like me. And so when I finally had that chance as an adult to see that in gaming, in media, those few chances, it really made a difference. And I know it makes a difference for all of the younger generations who now get to grow up and see more of us in these hero and leadership roles and play in these roles as well. And Cicero, you're right. DMs aren't the only one who create the game. The players do too.
Yeah, I'm usually right.
Yeah. And I think, just like as a note to add to it, just like as something as we get to a more inclusive future and we continue to build that bridge, is like the adjustment that the creators like Wizard of the Coast is doing right now. Like, they're doing a lot of good things, especially through, like with Tasha's, the ability to not be so bounded up of a race as an idea. Of like orcs are always strong, or like certain races are always intelligent, and certain races are always faster. The genetic determinism of it all is like a weird thought to like have for races, where it's like, it's not about the value of the person or like the ideas or the history that they had. It's like, this is your race, you have this. Right. Like, I feel like we'll slowly be, as it develops further into the future, that like a lot of stats will just completely disappear or rearrange itself to like a different degree. Like, I just don't see the idea of like strength and like intelligence being so bound up with race anymore, especially after Tasha like took that off. But it's still like a half step. There's still much to be done. I mean, like the whole background ideology and characterization of some races is kind of horrifying. I mean, like the tieflings, I mean, they're supposed to be inspired by like the devil and like demons, and they're automatically ostracized as like the introduction to the character's race in the player's handbook, where it's like, these characters are situated in ghettos. And it's just like, what is the thought process that makes you want your fantasy character, like all fantasies or all races of that character in the fantasy realm that you built, to be like that? I feel like there's small adjustments that can be made where it's like, you don't have the locking character archetypes like that. I feel like us as players and people on the realm, like we automatically throw that away. But like the fact that it's baked into part of like the system just from the get-go is things that need to be addressed.
And you know, not to make this a tennis match between myself and Brent, I want to piggyback off of that and talk about my good friend and former castmate Sharif Jackson and his character on Rivals of Waterdeep, Sharafka or Shaka, who he rolled as a tiefling, and he leaned into those stereotypes to not only like take control of them, but kind of take the power back from them, and made it like the tieflings were the black people, right? They had been wrongly stereotyped into being a thing. And so when he saw other tieflings, they knew it to not be true. about them, the things that everyone had stereotyped them to be. They knew that to not be true, and so they had there was almost like a little bit of a code switching, almost a head nod that happened between Shaka and other tieflings that he met on his adventures, because they understood the oppression that they felt and suffered as a result of people calling people while we're talking about it. But yeah, so like as a result of the issues and the things that they had seen, they had an automatic kinship, and he managed to take that and make it such a positive, and the character that he portrayed was so good, and he did such a great job with it, that the character has been immortalized in the game Idle Champions. So it's now an Idle Champions character. Reef, you owe me $5 for that plug. But like that observation that you're making, Brent, really helped me to like solidify the brilliance and the genius that is Sharif Jackson, because I think he had already kind of alluded to that and verbalized, articulated some of the things that you said, but I realized just how deep down the well he had gone with that thought, with the way that he portrayed this character over the last 10 seasons. So if you guys aren't watching Rivals of Waterdeep, here is my plug for you guys to watch the newest season of Rivals of Waterdeep, being DM'd by our good friend Masood. So check them out on the WotC channel. So, or actually, I think they're on Rivals of Waterdeep now. Oh, but cool. There you go. Cool. There you go.
I wanted to jump in real fast here and just, my imagination is running wild with everything that you're all sharing. Brent, you particularly are, inspiring me to talk about the word race and how uncomfortable it is for me that that's a word that is used in this world of tabletop gaming. Seeing how race was something that was really constructed in order to make it okay to continue the practices of race-based slavery, really dating back to Prince Henry of Portugal, who went on this huge, funded all of these excursions to go to Guinea and all of these places in Africa. And when they brought people back, he had, I think it was his nephew, Gomez de Zurara, who was an author, create the races. And it was, he lumping all of these people from Africa together and calling them the black race, Afur. And even though all of these people didn't really, they were as all of the different shades, all of the different languages, they really, we're all human being. That's the race. Or maybe species is a better word. So I can see, based on what I'm hearing from you all, how problematic it is to have this word race. And, oh no, that's just fantasy. We're not talking about race like in a real life race, but how can a young person growing up playing D&D make this distinction between these races that are lifted up because of their intelligence and others that are lifted up because of their strength? That inherently is creating a racial hierarchy, which I can see being adopted into daily interactions with people based on what they look like. So I just wanted to speak that into the conversation, and maybe we can collectively change it to species or whatever other work needs to happen to make things more inclusive.
I think. Go ahead, Chad. I'm sorry.
I just want to say I love that idea of renaming the backgrounds of these different people in the game, and I think it kind of speaks to me on like the magic of D&D and other tabletop role-playing games, of how, I'm sure I don't know the backgrounds of the people that created, and selected these words and selected these backgrounds and the stories. I know their names, but I don't know them personally. I don't know what their own biases were when they were creating these things. But I could see them saying, oh, this is a game mechanic justification, whatever. But to me, that these games have grown to be so real. I know I'm one of those people, and my cast is certainly those people too, that we want to live in these worlds. We want these worlds to be so real. And when you do that crossover, because I've heard other people talk, why, this is a game, why are you talking about, orcs and things? Orcs aren't real. But it's like, well, to us, these worlds that we create are real, and they are reflections of the world that we actually live in, right? And so that's one of the reasons we're even doing this panel. Like, why even do this? Why even talk about this? Because there is crossover from the worlds that we are creating versus the world that we're all living in day to day. And I love this idea of taking that word race and just being like, yeah, it's over here. Let's do species, because we're all humans, right? There's no race. We're all humans. We have different flavors. I'm a tall human. There are less tall humans. We have all these different parameters we can define ourselves with, and then putting that into the language of the game, so that new people who come to this game and kids who are playing this game aren't being taught these these terms like race, and being able to say, oh well, okay, I'm a light-skinned human, so I have +1 to whatever bullshit, I'm like just removing that. So just for the people I know that are sitting out there, because I probably would have been one years ago without having any hatred in my body about racism of any kind, but trying to figure out like what does it matter? And I think it does matter. So I'm rambling, so I'll hand it back to you, Cicero.
Oh no, you're perfect. Well, you're perfectly clear. I think like there's several other TTRPGs besides Dungeons and Dragons that have been trying to address this. I know with Pathfinder 2nd edition, instead of races, they've been doing like ancestry, and ancestry can mean a bunch of things. From anything from your angelic blood to demonic blood to you're from chaos, or you're part cat person. It could be, or dog person. It could be anything. Right. So, and then it's like the background and the culture that you're from informs more of who you are stat wise. I mean, like if you were a professional sailor or a soldier, that gives you strength. Who you are intrinsically gives you your strength and like your identity more than like where you're from or what is in your blood or whatever that means.
Right. And Pathfinder, from what I heard, I haven't had a chance to play it, and I would love to one day. From what I also heard, they also have a variety of genders and orientations that folks can choose from. So it's not just the binary boxes, not just the standard racial boxes or two gender boxes. And like you talked about, backgrounds that are really based on real life experiences of BIPOC folks.
Well, and I think what that is showing is a willingness by the creators to be more inclusive, right? And they're not going to get it right the first time. And to be honest, even when they get it right in that moment, the next week we're going to learn something else, right? We're going to learn something new. We're going to sit back and hear from someone else who has been marginalized and says, hey, you know what? I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, but it would be cool if you didn't refer to this thing like this, right? Because this is what that means. And if you're not trying to be a jerk, you say, oh, okay, well, the next time I do that, I will try, I will use different language to refer to that thing, right? Because it doesn't take away from what you're trying to convey if you change the name or you change the language. In fact, it adds something, right? Because it gives the viewer, the consumer, the opportunity to see that there is a difference from what they would normally see, right? Because if they've done this before, they know, oh, okay, it's going to ask my race, but it's not asking for my race. It's, or it's talking about cultures and background and ancestry. Why is that? And then, if you want to do the research, if you want to do the work, you can learn why that change was made. And I think if there's one thing that non-BIPOC people can get from this conversation, it's doing the work, right? Being curious about a thing and then doing the work to find out why it is that way. And that's how it's, understanding your biases and acknowledging them and trying to change them and being willing to do the work, which I guess is part and parcel with understanding your biases and wanting to change them. But that's where we are now as an American society, as BIPOCs, if I can speak for the diverse panel here, for the marginalized folks here on the panel, that's where we are. Is we're ecstatic that you're here on our side of the line now, trying to yell with us, trying to help amplify our voices. But when we're done yelling, you can go and yell in your spaces, right? Do that work. And if somebody has something that they want to say to you and you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know that, but I'm going to find out why that is. And then go and do the work and come back and find it. It is literally, I had this conversation on Twitter just the other day. And I, because I'm an old person, I remark about this all the time. It has literally never been easier in history to learn history.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
Cool,
like there's just so much information out there for you to get. And think about it this way. If you didn't know a foreign language, you go to a foreign country, a country where their native tongue is not English, and you go there as a native English speaker and do your best to speak their language. When you wind up sitting and talking to someone who is a native, they will appreciate your efforts so much that, it may not have been grammatically perfect. It may not have even been structurally the way that it's supposed to be done, but you made the effort to try and say, hey, I see you, and I'm trying to meet you where you are, right? They will go out of their way to help you, to teach you, to guide you the rest of the way, because they've seen that you've made that effort. And I'm telling you, non-marginalized people, if you go out and you do that work and you come to me or to anyone else just about, and you say, hey, look, I went and I did this research and I saw this thing and I saw this other thing, and I've been reading, but there's just this one part that I don't understand. Can you help me with that part? Right? They were going to be more willing to help you because they've seen that you've gone out and you've made the effort to try and meet them where they are. And you just need help closing that gap. And that's where we need you guys to be, is to help us close that gap. Help us close that gap with your friends and your family. Help us close that gap with the language that is used in the materials for the things that we know and we love. Help us close those gaps when you hear your friends acting like jerks on Call of Duty. Just help us close those gaps.
I think just to add with that, to piggyback off what Cicero said, I think there's a lot of fear in having these conversations, and I want to acknowledge it's hard work. It's not easy work that we're trying to present, and I think in a way for us to all approach it, it needs to be, I think of it this way, like low stakes coffee conversations. Everyone's sitting down, everyone's waking up and trying to get started in the morning. And it can be a very simple step-by-step way. It's like, okay, I don't understand this. What's this? And just being kind and patient as everyone can on both sides. Just like, if you don't understand, we'll get you there. And if you're frustrated and talking about it, which I know a lot of people are, giving the leeway to let people stumble their way through. Right. Just to find the wording to just really grasp the concepts. because I think for a lot of people right now, it's just trying to like begin the process again. Like, I think of a part of it was like, as we get older, we kind of feel like we've learned what we need to learn, and we're kind of set in our ways, and we need to acknowledge that we probably didn't get everything we needed as children or as teenagers or as like young adults studying colleges, where it's like there's always more to be given and added and learned and spread and taught. So I just want to add that point to the conversation.
Yeah, Jed, I kind of want to put you on the spot for a second.
Go ahead. I was just about to say something, but
feel the heat.
Yeah.
So
bring it.
Well, so I know that I've talked about doing the work, and I know that personally that you have done lots of that work, and that you felt some of that frustration in being the change that you want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I guess as I was talking about, like, when someone is doing the work, sometimes they have those questions like, I've tried A, B, and C, I looked these things up, I've got that, and someone keeps coming to me with these D and E questions, and I don't have answers for those questions.
Right.
So do you know what any of those questions happen to be? Like, here's an opportunity for you to maybe echo some of your frustrations, and maybe some of the frustrations of people that have been allies when they've gone out to their communities to try and spread the good word of equality and inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a very a personal story, and I'm not going to give too many specifics, but
name, spill that tea.
Yeah, I know. But I'll say, a lot. So I've been kind of, in my own way, being, trying to fight this fight from my side with very little knowledge and tools until kind of everything erupted last summer, and as we jokingly but accurately called the Great Wide Woke, at least at that time, and started getting into real conversations and learning about anti-racism and learning about systemic racism and learning about things that I had no idea about, and then starting to see some of those kind of destructive elements within my own close personal circles, which there was no overt racism that was obvious, because that I would not stand for. But that's like, I feel like that's the smaller percentage of the really dangerous stuff that's out there, which really goes into the systemic racism side. And with some of these loved ones of mine, I've started to have conversations and started bringing them information and the things that I've learned, and was basically shut down and had tried several times. But I can get really passionate about this, and I realized I probably hitting that frustration, which, Cicero, we've talked about this even recently, like, my experience in fighting this battle is like infinitesimally small compared to any person of color who's had to deal with this on a daily basis, right, your entire lives. So I'm like, okay, I got a lot of fuel to get back there and stay in this fight and use the information and the tools that I've learned from trying to be an anti-racist. So I've actually gone back to some of those people in a very different avenue, because I feel like I was at first just like, well, we give you this information and automatically you're going to change and be on my side. And that didn't work.
Right.
And then it was, okay, here's a little bit more information with some empirical evidence, which I could see maybe started to intrigue some people, but still didn't get the effect. And that's where I kind of got frustrated and left. And recently I decided these are good people, and I've got to stay in this fight, right? I can't give up, because if I can't even change or at least slightly open up the eyes of people near me, then I need better tools. I need better conversations. I have to go back to Cicero and Jamie, and now Javier and Brent, and be like, okay, huddle up. Let's figure out how to crack this one. But I went back with just kind of empathy. And what I have really realized is even good people out there who don't understand the systemic racism part are so actively participating in it because for two reasons. The fear of change, of feeling like, well, we're, they're not saying it, but like we're on top of the pyramid here. And by obtaining true equality or equity, that may not be the same anymore, right? So I think that's on the one hand. And then on, I forgot what my other point was, but it'll come back to me in a moment. But even on that one alone, sometimes just talking about it and acknowledging it and saying, we're a lot better as a species if we could all come together. There are so many beautiful minds in all of these places that aren't giving the same opportunity to rise up and contribute to our species as a whole. So if we can really try to level that playing field, that equity would have a huge payoff for us just as a species, right? And for you personally, you're going to live a more fulfilled life. So I kind of took that approach. That actually, I think, helped. And I have made some very minor headway. But one thing I wanted to talk about with all of you is that it's easy to get on here and kind of talk these big kind of concepts and theoretical things, but and I think this kind of goes back to you putting me on the spot here. Like, what can we actually do as allies, right? This is your chance to kind of let's build our ally army here. What can we do? So I'm taking my messaging out to the people I love and starting there and trying to start a transformation. There are grand things I would love to see in government change to start dismantling the systemic racism, which I think is the biggest problem. But what else could we do?
Well, I would love to pass that over,
go ahead.
if I can, actually to Javier. Javier talks a lot about abolitionist education and values, and I think that would be a really great place to start to answer the question.
Yeah, I was actually wanting to share, Judd, that I'm thankful for you sharing your story, and I know it mirrors a lot of people who may be watching and others that are not watching. And one thing you said the word payoff. What is the payoff of us doing this work? And I think it's a good thing we talk about different abolitionist groups, and I know one of the things is it's mutual aid, not charity. And what policies, because at the end of the day, I think we're talking about two things. We're changing hearts and minds on one end. On the other end, we're changing policies. And those are, what one is personal, close, and emotional. It's your family, and the other one you have to build community power for. But I think the big thing in both is to help people to realize when we institute policies that uplift the Black woman in America, it's actually going to be good for all people, including white people. And I know that that we can find a lot of evidence to back that up. But, one quick thing is universal health care. White people would benefit more than any group from universal health care, yet who has, been taught that you can't get anything for free in this country unless, you are a billionaire already, and let's not go into that. What is abolitionist education? If you're not familiar, it is a tradition that stems back to abolition, those working to abolish slavery, even globally, but especially with this tradition. Abolishing slavery in the US. And there were scholars and activists and community organizers that came together to do this work. And it has a lot of roots in indigenous traditions and African traditions. Some of the values that we receive from abolitionist teachers are the values. I always love to start with joy. We're talking a little bit here before getting on about really taking care of ourselves and going there when we have to go there and to inform ourselves and have those hard conversations, but then to come back and always come back to a place of joy as a way to keep us in the movement long term, because we don't need anyone burning out. We need everyone to be in the movement long term, so that joy has to be part of that. I spoke a little bit about mutual aid. The problem with charity is that, that's another gate that someone on high decides if you meet this requirements, then you get the money. But humanity on either side is not uplifted in charity, but mutual aid invites us to come into relationship with each other and be accountable with each other. Which brings me back to my next thing of building community power. Some people say recruiting, some people say networking, but really we're just reproducing colonial structures if we're using that terminology. So I was very careful about building community power, kind of what we're doing here. Jamie invited me to be a part of this, and I'm so glad that now I'm, hopefully becoming part of this community tonight, and inviting us to all continue learning together. So it's in this world that is capitalist and individualistic, it's telling you to do everything by yourself. You live with your own nuclear family in that house. You go to the grocery store, everything is delivered, everything is like individual wrap size. We're not, our indigenous traditions say, let's all come together in groups and let's all, be there for each other. Let's have, even in New Orleans, Louisiana, free and enslaved Black people gathered in the town plaza to still practice. They had one day a week where they could go to the town plaza. What did they do? They created art, they created music, they danced, they sang. So coming together is also a huge part of that, and says to anyone who wants to do this work to be accountable. Where, to circle back to something we were saying earlier, it is no longer enough to be not racist. Not racist goes along with the, Judd, you said like the more covert racism, the systematic racism, which is probably the more, you could say, the more dangerous one in one way, in one instance. And yeah, just being aware of all of those different ways that, when we talk about decolonizing, what does decolonizing mean? I'm quoting Dr. Rosales Meza. Decolonizing means to unlearn all of the ways that you have been taught to be violent towards yourself and others. And really, we can apply that to so many ways, but we can start to point at the things that are colonial, the colonial capitalist patriarchy. How do we divest from the capitalist colonial patriarchy? We're saying Pathfinder 2 is good. Let's all put our money into that, right? We want to be pursuing these relationships when we're doing anti-racist work. There are plenty, though, of incredible Black academics on Twitter specifically. Bettina Love and Dina Simmons are two. Bernice King comes to mind. Really, my big strategy is like follow the work that Black women are doing. They've already been doing this work. Abolitionists have been doing this work for years. People who are doing decolonizing everything, decolonizing the music classroom, decolonizing tabletop RPG. I guess that's what we're doing tonight, right? But to start to recognize and look at that language, be in community with people, and then look at the teachers. They've already been doing this work for so long, and those resources are out there for us to find. And I'm happy to point anyone in the right direction.
Cool.
Yo, you're the dopest.
Yes.
You really are. I love you so much, Javi. The other thing to think about, and Judd, this is something that maybe will be helpful to you as you sit and deal with your community, as you're trying to create spread anti-racism like a positive virus. Right. And that is this concept of finality that people look at lots of things that are essentially infinite as finite, right? And in this case, equality. They look at equality as something that is finite. If I give you more equality, that means I have less equality.
Right.
Right? Which is completely anachronistic.
Right.
But it is the mentality, it is part of this colonial, capitalistic patriarchy that creates this thought process that, I have to look out for number one. I have to get mine first. And, it's me against the world. Yeah. Or me and the members of my team. And my team can be my household. My team could be my cultural identity. The team could be my block. The team could be, a sports team. Whatever it is, we will figure out a way to group us, to make us a have and make someone else a have not.
Right.
And one of the ways that we do that is with equality. And, instead of looking at equality as being something in a bucket and we're taking equality out of the bucket, equality is the ocean. Right. And you can get a spoonful and I can get a spoonful and there's still plenty of equality out there.
Yeah.
Right. We will never get rid of, the equality. Right. Like we can
we're not going to run out.
Yeah. We can keep going back to get some more equality. And, part of the issue and one, I want to thank you for doing the work and going out and like I said before, being the change that you want to see, that we all want to see in the world, but also to encourage you to continue and to not get frustrated. Right. Because think about it this way, American racism has had a 400-year head start on the 13 months that you've been trying to talk to
that's true.
Your friends and family, right? Yeah. And so while they don't believe they are the people that you say they are, that they are. And you just it's not, there's no question about what they are. Sometimes people are racist, right? Like people are racist because they don't know any better. You were racist. I was racist. I was sexist before Me Too, right? And I had to sit back and first acknowledge that, oh, wait a minute. I heard somebody do and say a thing that I know that I have done and or said, and I didn't mean anything by it. But I did it. So I'm culpable. And if I'm culpable in that instance, I can't assume that I'm not culpable in all sorts of instances. So I've got to tear all my stuff down and acknowledge that I was part of the problem and I actively have to be part of the solution.
Yep.
Right. But as a result, the reason, part of the reason that it was easier for me, or it was quick for me to make that realization about myself, is because I am part of a marginalized group. So I know what it feels like to be marginalized. And when I think of the ways that I participated in marginalizing, women of all different ethnicities, that's not who I want to be. Right. That's not who I want to teach the people that are in my care to be. That's not the type of person that I want to put out into the community. So I've got to change. Yeah. And I've got to be willing to listen to my faults and be able to acknowledge those things. And your friends and family haven't gotten to that point with this yet. Right. Because they don't have, they don't have that frame of reference necessarily. Yeah. Right. And it's just a matter of just making the logic make sense for them along the way.
Yeah, I think that's entirely it too. Like, oh, I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Well, just to expand on Cicero, for me, it comes down to 4 things. And a lot of this actually came from what Cicero was sharing. One is acknowledging the role that you play in any kind of ism. The ism is about removing barriers from that dominant category. In sexism, it's men. In transphobia, it is cisgender people. In racism, it is anyone who is not considered white. And acknowledging the fact that it is about the fact that if you are in that category, you have barriers that do not exist, that are specifically created to keep everyone else who doesn't identify in that dominant space, to keep them down, to keep them oppressed, and to keep them in these roles like slavery and in the kitchen and all those things. The other thing that it comes to is also humility. This is a tough fight. It's tough conversations. And as hard as you're working, not everyone is going to see that and acknowledge it. And there's going to be, the more work you do in this, the more, I want to say, possible confrontations there might be. And taking the time to swallow the pride and making sure that you approach from that humble space. Mm-hmm. And then also focus on outcome. I think one of my favorite sayings is that diversity is a fact. Equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. And so if we can focus on that belonging rather than just the diversity, just the equity, or just the inclusion, but creating that space where everyone can belong, that I feel like is that sweet spot of where we can come to. And I had a 4th one. My brain is going right now. I don't remember if I mentioned it. I don't think I did. Maybe it'll come back to me.
No, I feel like, I have some hope in that, racism is a taught thing, right? I have seen it. I've seen when I was young and visiting family in the South, I have seen it taught to kids. I've seen hate taught to kids. And the good thing about knowing that, we're not biologically programmed for racism, right? So if it can be taught, it can be untaught. It can be unlearned, and we can learn new things. And I think you touched on a good thing, that humility, learning these lessons, no matter what it is, if it's sexism or racism, or we all have these biases and these issues. There are a lot of them built in, especially if you are, for me, I'm a white male in America, right? I got a lot of like the kind of the easy street standard stuff, right? And so there's a lot that I've had to look at, which I've had wonderful people. I've had women who have pointed things out to me that I could, do better, or people of color. And I've learned a lot of lessons, and it's really hard, right? Whenever somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, you're doing this thing, you could be doing better. It sucks. It hurts. You're like, if you're a good person, you never want to feel like you're doing something bad, right? So you do kind of have to swallow that. But the other side of it, when you acknowledge it and you change, the feeling of growth and the feeling of being part of a bigger, better future is so much better than that feeling, that temporary feeling of shame if you make those changes. So I'm trying to lead, I think, more with that. And I mentioned before, like kind of coming with empathy so I could really understand what, say, some of my people in my family circle who came up in a very different world with a very different education and very different exposure to things, and starting to slowly learn or figure out how to teach them to unpack it and recognize maybe things that they were taught and they didn't really realize that they took to heart. Not that we're going to be able to get everybody, right? There's probably always going to be jerks out there who are going to feel this, but the more that we do all of this work, the more that we have the representation there, so young people of color or of any identity can see themselves as the heroes and grow up to be those heroes. The more we do these little things, they have, I think, profound impact. So,
yeah, I'm right there with you, Jed. I look at this problem and like ways to sort of navigate around it, or like really try and fix it. But like, how much can you really fix on your lonesome or with a community of so many people that it's an it's a battle of defanging the unknown, taking the teeth out of things that are scary to people. Like, not everyone has the chance to really interact with people outside their cultures or outside like their own tiny community, their family. There's a way to look at it where it's like we're doing the education of like bringing more aspects and perspectives to the problem and the idea of other people. But we're also trying to take away the fear and the notions of basically wrong ideas that people have been taught about others. Mm-hmm. It's like we're filling in the holes that we create, basically. Like, people have like, you know, the fear of like Black people in general, or the stereotypes taught through other sources of media, as like television and film has done for a long time, but getting better every year, just a little bit more. Integral steps to move forward with everything. But it's that hardy push where it's like, if we take away enough of the negatives and fill in with more of the positives, that eventually we will get to at least a solid foundation that everyone can work with and have that mutual aid kind of step to like really facilitate everything going forward. Because as Cicero said before, the work we do now is just the foundation for the problems that we face in the future. There's things we're going to look down the road that we never really grappled with yet, and it will be hard for us as we get older ourselves to really do that idea. But if we keep that mindset where it's like we're taking away more of the negatives to fill them with more of the positives, we will have hopefully a more fulfilling future for all, with more equity and more inclusion and more diversity.
Yeah, I mean, we will get better. Things have always gotten better, but it's a process, right? Like, and sometimes as progressives, sometimes as people who are trying to champion change, we get frustrated with the fact that we've acknowledged a truism, right? And it's indisputable. And the people that we engaged also acknowledge the truth of it, but the things don't change, right? Or they change, but it's incremental. And and there is frustration with the fact that the change has not happened as quickly as it should, now that we've all acknowledged the truth, right? Like, but life doesn't work that way, and we have to, and as you get older, you start to gain a little bit of, not only do you gain wisdom, but you gain a little bit of patience. Like, you get to see that there are so many things in your own life that you're like, oh, hey, I'm getting fat, so I need to exercise so that I can not be fat. Right. And then you go out and you bust your ass for 2 hours one day, and you're like, you look down and you're like, yo, I'm still fat. What's going on? Right. Like, I did it. Right. I did the work. And right. But and duh, obviously you got to go back every day for X amount of time, plus how fat you are to make yourself not, right? Like that's it. It sounds silly when you talk about it that way, but the concepts are the same, right? And that's that's how we sat around last year. It was amazing. It was amazing to see, in the midst of a pandemic, right, that the likes of which none of us had ever seen, and hopefully we'll never see again, to see the multitude of people around the world stand up and say enough is enough, right? That not only was I feeling this, not only were the people on this panel feeling this existentially for their entire lives, but we got to see everyone around the country and everyone around the world that looked like us said, we're going through the exact same shit, and we've had it up to here. Enough is enough, right? but it's still happening, and it's still going to happen. But what has happened is there is awareness. There is an acknowledgement by the universe, by the earth, by the planet, by the inhabitants of it, to say, yeah, we're giving you guys a raw deal, and that's kind of how it is, and we're working through that right now, right? But at least that's happening, right? Like there's when I was a kid, so long ago, back in the 1980s, where people wore short shorts, like. There were still people on TV that were referring to black people as coloreds, right? Like, just politely, like that was what you said in polite society. You just call them colored folks, right? And like, there's all sorts of stuff that has happened, but has transitioned and has become unacceptable, right? But like, those are things that are as part of the process, and we've got to acknowledge the process, be present and aware that the process is happening, and acknowledge that it's happening, and have some patience with the process. But also for Judd and for a lot of those folks that are out there doing the work, recognize, and part of this, part of the loss of ignorance is taking the time to talk to people and say, hey, maybe you didn't want to have these biases, but I'm showing you how you have them, right? And now the choice is yours, right? Do you want to not have these biases, or do you want to not do the work to remove them, right? And if you choose not to do the work to remove them, then you also have to take the responsibility of being a racist, right? Because that's who you are, right? It's who you were before. Maybe you just didn't know it. Right. But now I'm telling you that you are, and you can't pretend that you aren't anymore. So now you also have to take that badge with you. And that's okay. Right? Like, that's okay. If you want to be a racist, I will fight and die. We're all Americans. If an American wants to be a racist, I will fight and die for your right to be a racist. Like, go right ahead. Go right ahead. But like, just don't impugn me or impede my ability to live my life. Right? Because then we have a problem. But if you want to hate me, go right ahead and hate me. Look, I got enough people to love me. You hating me is not going to change that, right? So who cares? But what you can't do is pretend to be at best agnostic to what is happening, in the world with respect to racism, when I know, and you know that I know, that you really are racist. So you have to own that badge and take that responsibility and hold that mantle with you. And if that is a problem for you, then maybe it's time to look inside yourself and figure out why that's a problem for you and work on changing it.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that's really well said. I like that idea that, you're choosing a road, right? I'm bringing you to a crossroads. On the left, you've got racism, and you're going to take that road, and you're going to own it. Or over here is growth, and I'll tell you. And I like going back to Javi's, just that feeling of joy, and putting this through a lens of joy. Like that left road, that racism road, is a sad, lonely road. There's a lot of joy over here. You find joy in equity. And equality. There's a lot more joy this way. Come with us this way. I'll show you how we can, take some of that programming away and show you a different way to be. Yeah, I really like that.
I hope someday you'll join us and the world can live as one.
Yeah.
Wow,
There we
well
go.
You are preaching to the choir, Judd. I appreciate you so much. A couple of things to add here. This work is painful because you are basically killing your shadow self. You're killing your old self, and that is painful work. And some people identify so much with their bigotry because it's their only point of superiority they have. And to ask them to give that up, oh man, that's the only way they feel powerful. But I love what else we were saying is equality is, there is an abundance of equality out in the universe for us to go get.
So true.
And we're going to go get it. There is this, I think, gonna be this pull to come back to normal, to go back to normal. I'm not just talking about things opening up, with a pandemic, but of, we did the Black Lives Matter thing. Like, we're good now, right? All these corporations made their statement how they love black people, right? We're good now. Well, that's kind of like, oh, we elected Obama, right? So there's no more racism, right? That was a legit thing that people were talking about, what I'm saying? So we need to, when we're saying like, okay, we're going to be anti-racist now, or we're going to be abolitionist or decolonial now, be aware what you're actually committing to. A lifelong practice of watching yourself, watching your reactions to the world around you, and to see things through a decolonial abolitionist lens, to understand that the way in which, again, you're harming others and yourself, because until we're all free, none of us are free. So, resisting that temptation to go, quote unquote, back to normal. I think another beautiful thing is to see a future. Another abolitionist value is freedom dreaming, to be able to dream what would a world look like if we all had equality. And I think that is something very important for us to actually visualize, live long and prosper. So that's really beautiful. I want to back up just in case for a little bit specifically with abolition. We know these activists worked very hard to abolish slavery, and Abraham Lincoln got all the credit for it. We really, when we dig deep and we look at our history, there were so many white and black abolitionists working together. And even though slavery was abolished, it became quickly brought back by, before I even get there, tips in a restaurant. That was a way to keep newly freed enslaved people. Right. Thank you for your patience with me. To keep them down, right? Right. And then the other thing is, there were these local patrols of people whose job it was to track down enslaved people and bring them back to, the enslavers, right. The human traffickers, maybe we can use as language. So this idea of these people protecting the property of the white wealthy elite.
They were called sheriffs.
They were called sheriffs, and that was the beginning of policing in the United States. Yeah. So even though slavery has been abolished, in that way we can still talk about how people are exploited for their labor in prisons. Especially in California with, having inmates fight fires and things like that. So these things are still very real. These things are still very harmful. And so there is still continued work using those abolitionist principles that are for fathers, for mothers, and for gender nonconforming ancestors left down for us. Two ways that it has shown up for me personally as someone, who doubled down on anti-racist education was a book by Bettina Love called We Want to Do More Than Survive, where she calls upon something that's the school, it's educational survival complex, meaning that schools were never created for the thriving of Black, brown, indigenous teachers and students, but was merely made for us to barely survive. So we have no options left. And this work is still alive in schools in this way, and in activist organizations in almost every city in the US, especially centering around abolishing police and the police state. And this brings me back to this idea of freedom dreaming. Most of us, and that's why abolition, I think, as an idea is so important in freedom dreaming, we cannot even imagine a world without policing. So many people listening right now probably said, what are you talking about? We can't abolish the police. Like, who will keep us safe from the dirty criminals? You know, and but I'm talking about like really freedom dream. Like, see all of the possibilities when everyone comes together, we build mutual aid, we make, you know, these historically disinvested and isolated communities, and we give them the same resources we give to the suburbs. Imagine a world where we didn't need that. And that's what we want to abolish. Mm-hmm. Anything that was built on the bones of people who looked like me, of my ancestors, native Tainos, and the enslaved people brought here from Africa. And that the only reason these people have this wealth is because it was built on the backs of the people who were brought here and killed here. So to not leave it on too much of a downer, because we have to go there, but again, joy, abolition is joy. And you know, I'll land the plane right now, I promise. As a teacher, what I learned from Bettina Love is we cannot just talk about Black death all the time, Colombian death all the time, Palestinian death all the time, and apartheid all the time. Because what are these dark children learning? Oh, my life is going to be all death.
Yeah. Right.
So therefore, it is our responsibility, especially as the adults in the room, to talk about children for a second, it is our responsibility to model absolute joy and love of Black people, of brown people. Can you just in this moment say, I love Black people?
I love Black people.
You know what I mean? Like,
Black people.
if you can't even do that much,
Right.
Girl. What I'm asking is real. Like, part of this has to be us loving when Black people win, just enjoying when Black people are happy, and uplifting especially Black women, because man, they're doing their thing.
Yeah.
And we just got to get behind and follow.
Yeah. I want to say two things really quickly. First is that racism is a lot like alcoholism. You got to take it one day at a time, right? It's constant work to remove yourself from racism. In much the very same way. The other thing, to piggyback off of what Javi is saying, what we got to witness last year, you know, from a socio-political standpoint, was an uprising, a lifting of an awareness of the burdens that we've carried as BIPOCs throughout our entire history globally, and you got to see businesses endorse that message. You saw sports organizations endorse that message. But if you guys want to be at the vanguard of, you know, seeing a corporate structure or an organized group really be at the forefront of this, follow the WNBA, because the WNBA is out there. They're doing the work. They are the ones. If you want to see somebody actually show how not to give fucks respectively, Go and watch the WNBA. Them sisters over there, they are revolutionaries, right? And revolutionaries in the best way possible. You talk about joy, they bring me joy. And not enough people, like you said, Black women have been leading from the front and ignored forever. And those sisters, not only from a social aspect, but also from a financial aspect, have been ignored in terms of the work that they are doing for us, for all of us, right? This is not a zero-sum game. Again, we are not swimming in a pool of equality. We are swimming in the ocean of equality, and there is room for literally everyone.
Yes, and I would like to expand that too in the celebration of Black women, also celebrating Black trans women,
Yes.
Black non-binary people,
Yes.
because we know when we look at intersectionality that the Black trans woman and the Black and brown non-binary person are the most heavily marginalized and violently oppressed, and I'll say it, murdered out of everyone that we see here in America. And we cannot leave them out in these discussions because we don't experience the world as just one identity. We experience the world as a culmination of our identities, and the world treats us based on the culmination of those identities and based on the societal norms that are being upheld, or as we're working toward dismantling. And so on that note, we will be opening up for Q&A soon, possibly in about 20 minutes. I want to do a little slight shift toward something that you can all do at home, specifically with tabletop RPGs. Cool. So grab a pen and paper or your phone next to you if you're watching your laptop, your notepad. Here are a list of TTRPGs that are making a difference. They are decolonial in their approach. They're inclusive in their approach. I'll start at the bottom of the list, and then I'm going to end with one that Brent actually helped us find, and I would love for you to talk about that. So we have on this list, so a lot of these are Kickstarters that one of them, I think they're all over, but you might still be able to pre-order, or if you already got them, super awesome. So we have Solani and the Girl Who Made the Stars. That's a Kickstarter. So Solani is based on Navajo creation myths.
That's cool.
And then The Girl Who Made the Stars is based on African star creation myths. We also have a board game called Spirit Island. So for anyone who's played Catan, this is, instead of Catan, where you are colonizing, you get to fight off the colonizers through Spirit Island. You can find that one on Amazon. I found that there. Then we also have Awfully Queer Heroes. Their Kickstarter for The Hunt for the Sunblade Tower is very LGBTQ inclusive. They have another Kickstarter coming up. If it didn't just launch, it's about to come up also. Then we have Coyote and Crow. Coyote and Crow is exciting because this is 100% Native people led and created. Beautiful game. I signed up for that Kickstarter. I'm looking forward to getting that, I think, at the end of the year. Then the final one that I would love to pass the baton on to Brent for, the headline that he sent me was a Huffington Post article, and it said, this board game uses vampires to fight anti-Asian racism, which, as a person who identifies as an Asian Pacific Islander, this, of course, is very close to my heart. We all know that anti-Asian Pacific Islander racism has been on a terrible spike of late. And so this game is called Jiangxi Blood in the Banquet Hall. And I would love to pass it on to Brent to talk about how he came about this and a little bit more about the game. And then we'll see where the conversation goes from there until we are ready for a Q&A.
Yes, definitely. And in researching for the talk we were having today, I wanted to go deep and find something that like addresses what we're trying to talk about. I mean, there's what is the game of like Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, that are just there for entertainment, but like a game that's trying to grapple with the ideas of racism. And this one stuck out to me like amazingly, especially in like AAPI Heritage Month, that this is something to uplift and celebrate, where the idea of the game is it's set in the 1920s, and it's about this family that runs a restaurant, and they deal with racism in the morning and vampires at night. It's like the horror of having to deal with the pain of regular life and the cosmic horror of like the undead at the same time. And like, even it's written into the rulebook, don't look at it as a hackney stereotype. Don't fall to that. These are family. This is people. And the story of part of America, like especially out of California, the rampant anti-Chinese hate that was here for so long. It deals and can bring up the topic of what's going on now and how to really address it. And just also the celebration of, like we were talking about with Cicero, more diverse voices. This is made entirely by two AAPI people. And this is the story they're trying to present to like spread an awareness, spread the culture, spread the identity. So it's not so foreign, it's not so strange. So I really highly suggest, this is a fun game, especially if you love horror, especially if you're looking for something that's fun and like gripping and just the story of trying to survive in America.
Thanks, Brent. And to give folks an idea of the specifically Chinese hatred that is happening here in the US that Brent talked about, this history goes back at least a couple of hundred years. And as recently as the 1900s, forgive me, I don't remember the exact decade, but here in Los Angeles, where the Role Players is based, 1/3 of the Chinese, and I put it in air quotes because we don't know if it was just Chinese people, it was anyone who looked Chinese, 1/3 of them were killed. They were murdered, gone, here in Los Angeles. In San Francisco with the bubonic plague, I think it was, because one person who looked Chinese had it, they quarantined the entire Chinatown of San Francisco, and only guess who could come in and out of that Chinatown? White folks. Nobody who looked Chinese or who lived in that community. And so that's why this game in particular, knowing that past and recent history is so exciting, because it, for me, like I said, it really hits close to home. Identifies half Filipino, half Salvadoreña, but I grew up with my Filipino family. And so that's very close to me.
Oh, and if I could add just one more element of history to this, like I would actually challenge most of the viewers to realize why a Chinatown looks the way it does. After I think it was 1890s, the earthquake that devastated San Francisco, they were trying to move out all the people who were in Chinatown. And if you look at the era and all the photographs from that time, Chinatown didn't look like Chinatown. It looked like regular America. But in an effort to try and establish a home, an identity, they turned Chinatown into a theme park for white people, just so they would have a space. The decor of most Chinatowns are based off religious iconography in China, and it's done in a way, the decor of it all was adapted for a white audience's idea of China. It was built so that they would have their mysterious East kind of connotations, and that the people who were living in Chinatown could have a home where they wouldn't be relocated and just segregated and pushed off away into like different corners of the world. And what they did in San Francisco helped set up Chinatowns in Los Angeles, New York, all over America. There's things in our history, especially the more you dig, that the structure of it all, the systematic nature of it all becomes blaringly obvious.
Yes, and that's colonial. That's
Right.
That's the colonizer mentality. Jamie, I thought you were going to talk about the Japanese internment camps.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that they gathered up.
That too.
Yeah, they you know, and just so you know, gathered them in concentration camps, and then what happened to their homes and their businesses? You know, people came in and just took those businesses and took their homes. So then when many, you know, those who survived the camps came out, they had nothing and had to start over, you know, from scratch. And we want to pretend that doesn't happen, right? And it's this idea, as you were talking, Brent, I was thinking of like this idea of the white gaze and how things are structured to be consumed, you know, by white Americans. Right. It's all, I made mention earlier of communities that are historically disinvested and isolated. So for example, organization, a community that's kind of left to their own devices, right? To fend for themselves, to figure their own thing out. And so a lot of these places, you know, even simple things like they don't have enough parks. So the greenery doesn't absorb heat. There's extreme heats in these areas. And I'm talking about the difference between the south side of Chicago and the north side of Chicago here. I'm not talking about places miles, like hundreds of miles apart. No, this is the same city that I'm talking about. And this is, what happens is we take over this section, we use it till we get all the resources, we move away, and then, whatever group is left there, right? Like, we're not going to fix the roads, we're not going to do any of this. That's that divestment from peace. And it may not be as violent as over policing, but it is just as destructive because it creates this generational trauma. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to fill too many people in about the details about what's happening in Palestine right now, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Gaza, of how, over the course of the last 50 years, Israel has grown to more and more and taking over more of the territory. And this has been ongoing since 1948, but people really don't think about it because of the nature that it's so ongoing until we have flare-ups that the world can't ignore, like what happened, where Israeli police came in to beat up Muslims during Ramadan, the most holy month of the calendar. Right. Of the Muslim calendar, and then the back and forth, the violence. But even though there's violence on both sides, it's clear who's dying and who's suffering under apartheid and the ethnic cleansing of this country. And to bring it back to gaming, what is the response of people as like? Well, one or two things like, oh, well, this is just video games. Like, hey, get your politics out of my video games, right? Get your politics out of my tabletop RPG. So I just kind of wanted to highlight, and did anyone notice this, that there was this whole back and forth at IGN, where IGN, similar to other places like Kotaku, put up a statement, saying here, if you want to support those who are suffering under this apartheid in Gaza, here are some places that you can go and donate and support. So that was promptly, which was great. And I was just like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Like, I'm so happy. Right. I haven't been this happy since Ben and Jerry's told us to tear down white supremacy. But my joy was slightly short-lived because the response from the parent company of IGN was to immediately take that down and to post their own response saying, hey guys, just kidding. That was, that was a statement that really highlighted one side of the conflict over the other. And basically we want a balanced view of the situation. If you really know what's happening, again, if you're listening to Muslim women, Arab women who are living there, who are going through this, people are talking about that when the sirens go off, they don't have anywhere to run. Right. Where are they going to run from the bombs, things like this. And I just love Tamir, who his last name is escaping me, calling out the entire gaming industry of like, hey, where y'all at? You were so live, you were so hot-headed about Black Lives Matter, but all of a sudden, what's different about this situation? Right. And that has a lot to go into the U.S. and its alliances, and that's a whole other panel. I think everybody, right? Yeah, 100%. 100%. Go ahead if y'all want to jump in on that and tell me what were your reactions.
Well, so I want to say, just to go back to talking about AAPI and Chinatowns and those representations. It's not a gaming reference, but I'm here to be the Pied Piper for it anyway. If you guys have HBO Max, please watch a show called Warrior, which is getting a season 3. If you're a Warrior fan, season 3 is coming. But a little quick and dirty about Warrior is Warrior was a show that was originally pitched. It was created by and pitched by Bruce Lee back in 1972 to major studios that he had worked with in the past. And they had seen a lot of success with him. And he wanted to pitch the show about this Chinese guy coming to San Francisco in the 80s, in the 1880s, kind of like this, Wild West, kung fu guy in America. And they shushed him out of the room, said, oh yeah, great idea, blah, blah, blah. Don't call us, we'll call you. And of course they never called him. And then 2 years later, Paramount was like, oh, hey, we need an idea. Oh, what about that idea that Bruce Lee gave us for free, apparently? Oh yeah, let's use that. And let's cast this guy, David Carradine, and call it Kung Fu. Mm-hmm. And that made David Carradine's career. He'll still hang in there. Hi-oh. But now finally, Bruce Lee's daughter and Justin Lin from the Fast and Furious director were able to get the rights, create a treatment, and they got money from Showtime to do the show. It was picked up by HBO Max after they killed Showtime, and it's finally getting a season 3. There are 2 seasons out, but it is a fantastic show about Chinese immigrants coming to work kind of after the gold rush in San Francisco and butting up against the Irish, who have now been pushed west after fighting in the Civil War and are now trying to find and make their way in this new country. And the waspy white folks that have lived there and, are the upper crust, and all of these different cultures coming to a head. And it's beautifully represented. It is very, very raw. It is honest in a way that you wouldn't expect, that you're proud of, right? Like that, those are the things where oh, they're not really pulling any punches when it comes to how they're dealing with race and the complexity of it all. And that's also a thing, right? If you have been in power, right? If you haven't been marginalized, in lots of ways, you don't know, you're not fully aware of how not marginalized, how privileged you have had it, right? And so when someone says things need to change, you're not even thinking about their perspective. You're like, everything is fine. Why do they need to change? What are you talking about? I can go down the street and buy some avocado toast whenever I feel like it. What's your problem? Right? But when you see things like this, you realize oh crap. Yeah. They gotta walk through some bushes to get to the avocado toast, and it costs them a lot more because they don't have any damn supermarkets with fresh produce in their neighborhoods, right? Oh, that's a real thing. Those are real problems, and I'm a reasonable human, and I don't want those to be around. But it goes back again to the slow progress makes at the giant levels. Even if progress at the 5-foot level here on this panel, we're moving 1,000 miles an hour. But when you get 10,000 feet, it's moving a lot slower. We don't feel the rotation of the earth. Yeah. We don't see it, we don't see it going around the sun. We don't feel it going around the sun, but it sure is, right? But if I jump on a motorcycle and I go 100 miles an hour, I feel that. And that's where we are. We're here, and we've got to reach the people that are in the stratosphere right now and get them slowly but surely back down to our level. They have spent the last 400 years living in the clouds. They've been up there for a long time. And we got to hook them and just slowly pull them down. Some of them will fall. Judd fell. But not everybody's going to fall. And, and some people will just stay up there, right? You pull, and if they're not coming down, let them stay there. You can use your energy and your efforts to pull the people down that want to come down.
Yeah. Damn, dude. Best metaphors ever. Just all night.
Yes.
Yeah. Metaphoro.
I'm loving it. Keep it going.
I love the idea of Cicero on like the dance floor, like with a lasso in his hand.
I got you.
Come on over.
The dance, come on. I think we have 20 minutes left. Did we want to do questions from the...
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to get us started with a question that was already submitted. So folks who are listening, if you have questions that you want to ask, please do ask that in the chat. If you are not comfortable asking the question in the chat, then you could potentially also message our super amazing producer, master moderator, Killer Panda, with your question. I would also like to challenge you, though, if you are hesitant to ask a question in the chat publicly, examine why that might be. We've created this, in fact, I would say it's not even a safe space, but a brave space to have these conversations. There is no judgment here. And as long as we are all respectful, then we can all continue this unlearning journey together. All right, so here's the question for our panel. As a DM and player, I like to include themes of discrimination so me or my players can champion against them. As a white male, I try to find chances to help, but often fall short. So in my fantasy games, I like having the ability to stand for marginalized and discriminated people. However, as a content creator, can I include these themes for the general public? What kinds of warnings or disclaimers should I include if I do? And then the follow-up question to that is, how has the answer to the above question changed recently? So for content creators, can they include themes for the general public, these kinds of things speaking to overcoming discrimination and challenges? And I think from what I hear, addressing colonialism within the game, and what kind of content warnings, disclaimers should they include? So actually, if I may try that out first. So it's great that you acknowledge that, yes, you're coming from this space as a white male who is creating these stories. What I would encourage you to do is, if you haven't already, is make sure that you're doing your research in the framing that you're giving it, because the framing coming from a person who lives these experiences is going to be a little different. And so what I would encourage you to do is yes, depending on what the content is, you're going to want to let your players know that this is what we're going to address. And so I personally recently started going through this in the sense that I have a world that is inspired by pre-colonial indigenous Hawaii and the modern day fight for sovereignty. For those who don't know, Hawaii was illegally seized. The lands were stolen by the US government and they were made a state. And so there are very strong movement out there and fight for sovereignty. And so this world was built for that. And I had the opportunity to bring this world to life for public entertainment with Awfully Queer Heroes. I've got to give them a shout out for this, because they came back to me, and I didn't realize this at the time because we're all virtual. I didn't meet the entire cast yet. Some are in the UK, Canada, across the US. And they said, hey, Jamie, we love this world. We want to see it to come to life, but we don't want to, we're all white. Everyone else on the team is white except for me. And they said, we don't want to be those white people who are going to represent indigenous characters, even in a fantasy world, because it wouldn't be right for us to do that. So I started adapting the world from a visitor perspective instead. Then the idea came up, hey, Jamie, what do you think instead of adapting this world and whitewashing it? And these are their words that they're coming to me. And so, of course, as a person who identifies as a person of color means a lot to me. What if instead you create a queer BIPOC team? And so that's where I landed with it. But in the background, in creating all of this, I had to make sure that all of the folks, whether it was the original team or the new team that's being built, One, are they comfortable with themes of colonialism, intentional themes of colonialism? Are they comfortable with different aspects of oppression and experiences? There's the digital RPG consent form that's out there. If you look it up, it's a great resource. You can customize it for yourself. And I made sure that we had those consents ahead of time. What are people comfortable with in their experiences? Because that is going to really inform how the game can move forward. If you have someone who's not comfortable with fighting a colonizer who's coming for whatever reason, maybe they, in their recent history, their people have experienced that, that's something that you're not going to want to push on that player until they're ready, because you're going to do more harm than you are going to do good if you force that on a player who's not ready to go there just yet. And so a lot of it would be background work in the consents that you get, and then also in the verbiage that you put out for promoting the show. You know, you could say, if it is about fighting colonialism, say it. We're going to fight colonialism through this. It's going to be a decolonial approach to D&D. And so I'll pass it there to my compatriots to continue the question. And KP, let me know if we have any other questions come up, please.
I think I have something that I can add to this. I mean, like, I can tell by the writing that it's the fear of doing the white savior syndrome. Like, you never really want to, like, this story's been told out and there's so many problems with it that it's best to just avoid in general. But it depends on, like, if you're doing it as a content creator, to look at the story of discrimination, and there's many forms of it. You don't have to just do it from an aspect of race. There's still the aspect of classes, this aspect of hierarchical systems. I mean, look at even just classical Europe, where if you were a serf, you were owned. Nobility owned people. And like whenever we talk about lords and ladies and knights and all that, we forget that they own the people in their land. And I think that's a story that needs to be told, because there's the fight against that, and the way it kind of developed in a way, the way really it's a pandemic kind of changed all that with the Black Plague. Or even if you want to look at from like even a recent aspect with like in the 1900s, the story of Les Miserables, where a lot of the people, like when you look at the story of employment, there's a story where a lot of people who worked for others, they could never really leave those jobs. They were, again, you were at the behest of the people you worked for. So in a way, changing that, if you want to make into a more fantastical story, working for an assassin's guild, working for a shipping company, becoming pirates. That's the whole reason there were pirates, that they didn't want to be owned by the people who ran the ships. There's so many stories of like discrimination and fighting for the freedom of it to be told. So I think there's many ways to approach it, and that the aspect you can come at it are varied. So don't feel that you have to eggshell walk around it. There are very fun allegorical stories you could tell.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll say is, well, first, Brent, the aspect that you brought and the options that you brought are brilliant. I didn't even think about those. But the other thing that I'll do is I'll caution the DM.
Oh, you muted yourself, Cicero.
Right, cool. Because nothing I had to say was important anyway. But yeah, I want to caution the DM. Simply because they're a DM, right? Like anyone who's ever DM'd a campaign sits for hours agonizing over story beats, and then I'm gonna breadcrumb them to lure them to this thing, and then we're gonna do this thing, and it's gonna play out like this, and it never does, right? So like if the DM wants to be able to have a very special episode of their table session, they also have to be prepared for their table never getting to it, right? And B, them not doing what you want them to do, right? So like if you go into it thinking, hey, I'm going to set up this scenario, and my table is going to, because they're chaos monsters, because every table is full of chaos monsters.
Absolutely.
Right? They are going to do their best to mess up my plans. If you come up with a contingency plan for, okay, if we get there and I try to teach this lesson, but they don't learn the lesson, I've got built-in repercussions for that, right? So then they can still learn the lesson, right? But you have to be prepared for that stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be a DM who wants to address these things, who wants to start stimulating those conversations, first, bravo to you, I applaud you, but also going back to the thing that I said in the beginning, you've got to be prepared to do the work, right? You have to prepare yourself for the eventuality of things not going the way that you want them to. Quick story about being a Black dude, right? When I walk out of my door every day, I am preparing myself with explanations for why I am where I am and how it's okay for me to be here, right? Not because I necessarily need that all the time, right? We're not in Nazi-occupied Germany, but in very much the same way, most BIPOC folks feel like they live in occupied spaces, right? And the only time I had a friend who he's a dear friend of mine. In fact, I married him and his wife. One of the ways that we really became friends was he moved into a neighborhood that is somewhat diverse, but very much a marginalized area in the north, on the north side of Chicago, one of the less affluent areas in the north side of Chicago. And we were sitting down, we were having a conversation. He was talking about how when he came off the train, there were these Black guys that would stand outside and they just looked angry all the time. And, you know, like they never did anything to him. They never said anything really aggressive, but he didn't feel comfortable around these guys. And they, you know, and he made him want to hurry his pace to make his way home. And I sat and I was trying to figure out it's like, oh, well, these guys, like, they're dressed in suits? He goes, yeah. He said, they had bow ties on? Yeah. It's like, oh, they're selling newspapers? Yeah. Like, oh, that's the Nation of Islam. Those are Muslims, right? They're selling their newspaper. And you know, what was funny was, and again, it's perspectives, right? So, like, I had never thought about the perspective of being a white person in a neighborhood where the Nation of Islam was able to freely peddle their wares. Never thought about it because I'd never experienced that, right? But that was unsettling for him because these guys were about business, right? The Nation, they're nonsensical guys, right? They gain respect in the hood, right? And what I said to him was, you know, what's funny, now that you've said that, I feel exactly the opposite when I see the Nation of Islam, right? Because while I don't subscribe to their tenets or their beliefs, what I do know is that the hood respects them. And so what I know is if there was going to be nonsense, it's not going to be there. So one of the places I feel the safest outside of my house is when I'm around the Nation of Islam, just out and about, because everybody respects them. However, on the flip side of that, you know that feeling that you had as you were walking away, you're trying to get away from them? That feeling of dread and that you just don't belong here? That's the feeling I have every time I step out of my house. Every time I step out of my house. So, you know, and like, that is something that is real for us. And if you're going to be a DM and you want to have these, you know, create these stories and create these allegories that can be teachable moments, those are the things that you need to think about. Those are the things that you need to be aware of so that you can prepare yourself for contingencies, for the scenarios that you're trying to present, and also to have those conversations, and so that you can have the empathy to correctly and fairly represent the thing that you're trying to represent.
Absolutely. And I would expand also to prepare your players for it too, because
yes.
if any of your players are BIPOC,
Right.
they're bringing these real lived experiences to the table. Right. And at any moment, any role playing really, and not just in a setting that will actively fight discrimination or colonialism, but in any D&D setting, a role-playing scenario can trigger real life experiences for some people because of what they bring to the table. And this actually reminds me of the fourth point that I had way back then that I forgot about. And it's everything that I feel like it sums everything up so beautifully. It's this equation that empathy and respect are far greater than understanding. We don't have to understand each other. We don't have to believe the same things, but we can all connect through empathy. We know what it feels like to be loved, to be hurt, to be rejected. And when we combine that with respect, that's how we can really move any of this work forward to really start to dismantle the systems of oppression that remove those barriers, keep those barriers away from the dominant society, the dominant identities, and keep those barriers to continue to oppress everyone else. And we don't have any other questions that have come so far, so we've got about 5 more minutes. If anybody has any burning questions, now's the time. Please send that in.
Just one more thing I wanted to add to there. I know there has been a lot of shows recently that have done a great job of inviting people of color to participate in the activities on their channel. So that was just another one I wanted to add on to the end of that question of, if you are unsure, I know sometimes it's like this competitive thing of like, oh, I want my thing to be the best. I don't want to work with other people, but really to follow and support Black content creators who are already doing this work. There's probably someone, with all this stuff, it's like, oh man, I wish I could find a tabletop RPG created by a Black creator. Oh, well, I can't find it. No, because you got to look for it, because that's the system we live in. You got to look for it. So we could say,
Brent?
Oh, I have the perfect one for you, and it's famous. Mike Pondsmith he's from California, a Black content creator. He created Cyberpunk.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yes.
If you're big into the neo-noir, that Blade Runner vibe, there is opportunity for you.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right. But, Cyberpunk is a great example of, while dystopian, progressive and diverse future. Right. And part of the reason that it is that way is going back to the thing that I had said at the beginning, which is that, you need creators of color that can go out there and think about those things, but you also need the people that are the gatekeepers to accept those changes, to be bold enough to say, oh yeah, we can roll with that.
To give up their power.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Like as someone alluded to the fact that, after last year being, it wasn't acceptable not to be racist, you had to be anti-racist, right? Like, and when we talk about things being acceptable within society, what we're really saying is that white people are now aware of it enough that they can't ignore it anymore, right? Because it was never acceptable for us, for BIPOC folks, for oppression to be happening to us, right? It was never acceptable. So we always wanted it to end. We always thought it was better for people to be anti-racist. But it wasn't until white folks realized, oh yeah, that kind of like, I can't call myself a good person and look at these things that are clearly happening and allow them to continue, right? And I can't keep my head in the sand anymore. I've got to stand up if I want to be able to stand up and look at myself in the mirror and be the thing that I want to be most, which is a good person, I can't allow these things to continue. So I've got to change.
Silence is violence.
Right.
Please say the wrong thing.
Right.
At least you're saying something.
Right. But you know, with that comes again this lack of ignorance, right? And you know, for some people, you know, again, racism, oppression in America has had a very, very long head start. So it is going to take people time to get there. But as they're getting there, you still have to hold them accountable, right? And people need to be accountable to themselves and to their communities for the things that they do and the things that they say. And if they decide that they don't want to change, they also have to take along this badge, right? Of an ism, right? Or an ist, right? You're a homophobe, you're transphobic, you're racist, you know, whatever it is, once you lose your ignorance, you have to make a choice. You're at that crossroads, right? And you know, the road of the ism is going to be a hell of a lot easier path, right? But you're going to have to carry that weight with you of the ism. Now, the other path there are going to be some challenges, but when you get to the end of it, right? And even along the way, you're going to see some of the most beautiful sights your eyes have ever seen, because you're going to see people loving, and as Javi said it, and every time I look at him, every time I'm in his space, it makes me smile, because he is just the epitome of joy, right? So you're gonna go on that path, and you're gonna see Javier all over the place. It's just joy everywhere.
Channel your inner Ferris Bueller.
Yes.
Theism.
Yes.
And speaking to that accountability, the way that we at the role players are literally going to hold ourselves accountable to this is that we're going to continue these panels. We're going to have more of these. And so we encourage you to stick with us, join these conversations, ask the questions during the next panels. You know, let's fight this together, because really that's the only way we will be able to fight this and to dismantle the systems of power that are keeping us apart and keeping BIPOC folks oppressed. And so on that note, we are just at about time, and we have, if y'all haven't heard yet, we have a very special announcement for the role players for this week, and I'm going to pass it on to Judd for that special announcement for Friday.
Oh, yeah. Yes. What? I'm sitting in our special announcement. You just can't tell because I got a green screen behind me. But we are returning to set after all of this time. I've spent the entire weekend with several role players, the Peter and Winky, building the set again. We are so excited to return here. So we'll see you here on Friday. Don't miss it, because it's awesome, and it's going to be so exciting to have all of us here together and actually see them. So that's our big announcement. And I'm so excited. Brent, I'll be able to see you.
Woo! In person, alive.
In person, I know. Sightlines.
Oh my God.
Oh, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. Yeah, so thank you, Jamie. Yeah, don't miss out.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you again to all of our panelists, to Javi, to Brent, to Cicero, to Judd, for taking the time to have these conversations, to be vulnerable in front of this very live audience, and to all of us who are still here with us today and those who are watching it in the future. Thank you so much for sharing a part of your time this evening to be a part of these conversations, to be a part of the unlearning, and to take a chance and to share in our vulnerability. So on that note, hopefully we'll see you all on Friday when the cast is back on set. And for the next panel, we'll keep you posted on when that's going to happen. Have a great night, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye.